Hello, and welcome to our 7th instructional video on how to plan UAS flight operations. This series of videos is brought to you by AmericaView in partnership with the College of Natural Resources and Environment at Virginia Tech, the Virginia Cooperative Extension, and Geoted UAS. My name is Daniel Cross, and I will continue to be your guide. As we discussed in the previous video, all pilots are legally required to get a pre-flight briefing from an official source, and be familiar with any information that could affect the safety of their flight. In our last video, we got all the information we need for our pre-flight briefing using aviationweather.gov and the FAA's NOTAM system. In this video, we will get the same information all in one place by using Flight Services or 1-800-WX-BRIEF. If you wanted to get your briefing the old-fashioned way, you could certainly call 1-800-WX-BRIEF or 1-800-992-7433. However, I find that using 1-800-WXBrief.com is much more convenient. If you choose to call, there's some information you need to have ready for the briefer. You will want to be ready to tell them what type of flight. For UAS pilots, this will always be VFR, the name of the pilot or the aircraft's registration number, the type of aircraft, the departure airport, time of departure, altitude you'll be flying at, the route it will take if it's other than a straight line, the destination airport, and an estimated time in flight. The briefer will then read all of the information that we'll be getting from the website, so be ready to take a lot of notes. Now let's go to the website. Before we get started, I want to mention that this site is not yet optimized for UAS operations and is primarily made for manned aviation. So the forms we'll be filling out and the information we get will seem a little awkward for our purposes. Once you've registered for an account, you'll want to log in. Then go up here to Flight Planning and Briefing. Here we will need to fill out some information. First, we put in an aircraft ID. Our oldest UAV has an actual IN number, but your UAV will probably have an 11-digit registration number, so enter as much of that as you can. Now, we will tell it what flight rules we'll be flying under. For unmodified Part 107 operations, that will be VFR. Next, we will skip down to departure. As we have previously discussed, this will be the 3-letter ID found on the VFR sectional map. For flights within the United States, we'll precede that ID with the letter K. The farm we planned our flights at is roughly in between the Virginia Tech Airport and the New River Valley Airport. So I'll depart from KBCB for the Virginia Tech Airport. Now we will set the departure time. This will be in a 24-hour format. However, unlike the briefing information, we can use local time for this field, so we don't have to translate to Zulu time. Now, we need to set the cruising speed. This box is pretty picky about the format. If it's not just right, it'll give us an error when we try to submit. The format it's looking for is the letter N followed by 4 digits. Our UAV cruises at about 20 knots. So we will enter N0020. If the format is tripping you up, click on the header text and instructions will appear. Now, we need to set the level or altitude of the flight. Again, this box is pretty finicky about what data it will accept, but by clicking on the header, we can find a long list of instructions. So here I will enter A004 for 400 feet above ground level. Now, we will set the destination. If there's only one airport nearby, we will re-enter the ID of the departure airport. If the area you're working in is too far away from any one airport, try to pick 2 airports that, if connected by a line, that line will cross close to your work site. Our site's close enough to Blacksburg that I don't really need to re-enter a second airport, but for the purposes of this example, I will enter KPSK for the New River Valley Airport. To get information for the entire time we plan to fly, I'm going to put my flight time into this field here. And to keep the system happy, I'll tell it that I have more fuel than the time we'll be airborne. Now, we want to click Route Brief. Here, we can pick what type of briefing we want. Most of the time you will want a standard briefing. However, we can also choose to get an abbreviated briefing for when a flight is delayed, but we've already gotten a standard briefing, or an outlook briefing for when the flight time is more than 6 hours out and we won't be able to get a standard briefing any closer to the time of flight. After the briefing is loaded, the first thing I do is go to the All tab. This is a concatenation of the entire briefing on one page. I want to print this as a PDF and save it with the rest of my mission information. This way I can read it in the field to refresh my memory if I need to, and I've documented the fact that I have indeed gotten a briefing. Now let's close out all of this and start reading our briefing. Each tab at the top will contain a subset of information that we will need to be familiar with. Under adverse conditions, we would have notifications about all the thunderstorms in the area telling us that this is not a good day to fly. If there are any temporary flight restrictions in the area, TFRs would be listed here, non-convective significant weather here, severe weather, and under air mets, we would have another list of important weather conditions such as IFR conditions and mountain obscuration. The next main tab over is the surface chart. This is going to be a basic weather map showing us the current location of precipitation, pressure fronts, and isobars, which indicate changes in atmospheric pressure, much like how topographic lines show changes in elevation. The next tab will give us a text readout of the current weather from our departure, destination, and a few surrounding airports en route. This is going to be the same information that's in the METARs from our last video. The next tab is the Forecast tab, which starts with the cloud forecast. Clicking on the arrows will advance the forecast. And remember that clouds are very important to us because we have to stay at least 500 feet below them. Next, we have a forecast for visibility, surface winds, and precipitation with thunderstorm icons everywhere. The black barbs indicate wind direction and speed, and the background color indicates how many miles the visibility will be. This is important because under Part 107, we have to have at least 3 statute miles of visibility. Like the last map, we can advance these forecasts by clicking these arrows. The Terminal Forecast tab gives us our terminal area forecast, or TAFs. This is going to be very similar to what we saw in the previous video. However, this TAF is not coded, making it much easier to read. The last forecast is the winds aloft forecast. Normally, winds are the most important aspect of weather when it comes to determining if a flight is safe or not. While surface winds may seem safe, the winds at higher altitude can still affect our flight. Here we can see that Roanoke is reporting the winds at 3,000 feet, or 17 knots, coming from 270 degrees. This is not so high that we can't fly, but high enough that our imagery might not turn out well. Blacksburg is right around 2,000 feet, so this information is for 1,000 feet above our site. With a little interpolation, we can figure out a guesstimate of what the winds will be like at 400 feet AGL. The next tab over, we have the list of all NOTAMs. Again, we want to be familiar with every single NOTAM, but pay special attention to the airspace NOTAMs. This is where we'll find changes to airspace, like TFRs, that might prohibit our operations under Part 107. There will be a list of NOTAMs for both the departure airport and the destination airport, as well as a set of NOTAMs in the En route tab, which are broken out into separate tabs by category. The last tab we want to look at is the UOA tab, which will mark NOTAMs, or their lesser used cousin, the DROTAM, and will show us if there are any unmanned aviation activities going on that have been registered with flight services. With this information, we're now ready to head out and fly, or in this case, it might be better to reschedule and wait for better weather. This concludes our series on flight planning for UAS operators. I hope that the series has been informative, and I wish you the best in your unmanned aerial endeavors. And please remember to always fly safe.